Welcome to How to Write a Scene That Works, which is a whole class just about writing scenes, how they work, how you can do it. And in this class, I analyze an entire scene from start to finish and tell you exactly why each word, literally each word, exists. I took the highlighter method that I tell you guys to download and I used it myself on my own work. All right, writing a scene that works. You got to start with what a plot should make you feel. And you guys have talked about a lot of this in some of my videos, but a plot is like a roller coaster. It should constantly have that feeling of, is it going to work out? The car doesn't stop longer than a few seconds, because if the car on the roller coaster stops, feeling goes away. You don't have that tension about going up the hill. You really want to have the plot keep moving. Stopping the plot happens when you have backstory or you foreshadow for a long time and you just kind of stop everything from moving forward. And just when you think things are cool with the plot, the bottom drops out. And then when you get to the end, you feel like, okay, I had a great ride. And that's what you want your reader to feel like. Every scene must have. It has to have a goal for the point of view character, which means the main character in that scene has to have a reason for being there. And I'm going to talk more about author goals and character goals for scenes in a minute. The goal has to feed into the book length goal because there should be no wasted scenes. None. Zero. Everything should feed into the book length goal somehow. The character has to have a motivation for going after that goal. It can't just be there. They have to have a reason for doing it and a bunch of conflicts that get in their way. If you want to write a really emotional book, you need to have emotional ramifications for the character for when things go wrong. This creates growth because remember, I talk about it all the time in all of my character videos. Characters need to grow and change, and this is how you put it in there. So when you construct the scene, you got to think about, what does my character need to do to get closer to their big goal? So you know what their book length goal is: to catch the criminal or to find a home for the lost puppy or whatever it happens to be. Whatever their book length goal is, they need to complete little tiny steps to get there. And so in Taken, Liam Neeson's movie length goal is to rescue his daughter. Billion little steps. Got to fly to Paris, beat up the guy at the airport, get information out of him, all of this other stuff that he has to do in order to get closer and closer and closer to finding her. And if you break down a movie, you can see how there's a little goal for every single scene, and that's super important. And the goals ideally will make the character step out of their comfort zone. In your book, you really want your character to kind of step out of their comfort zone at least a little. For Liam Neeson, when he gets to the girls and he rescues the wrong girl, that does take him out of his comfort zone because he's not a super nurturing person and all of a sudden he's got somebody's life that's depending on him. That price, that emotional and or physical price that they will pay at the end of the scene, becomes your sequel, which creates a new action, and that creates the puzzle pieces of a book, which is so awesome because I love when it does all that and you've got the puzzle pieces all together. It's magic. It's literally magic. Okay, so scene and sequel, which you probably heard about it a lot. I remember taking classes on it and being like, I don't understand what this is. And I just saw a video that gave completely wrong advice about scene and sequel. This is not how it works, but I didn't say anything in the comments there. But the scene is the main part. It should be like 99% of everything because readers want to see your character taking action. They don't like to watch them thinking. The character gets to the end of the scene and they either get what they came for or they don't. But either way, there has to be some kind of a failure. Yes, they got it, but, or no, they didn't, and furthermore. And when you've got that failure, it creates rising stakes. And I know that there was somebody that was asking me about rising stakes, and this is how you put those in there. At the end of every scene, there needs to be some kind of failure. It can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be both, it can be all of the above, and really creates a next level stake for your character. So if you have a yes, but the character achieves their goal, but at a price that's too difficult to pay, like Jack finds his son, but he has to sacrifice his wife to rescue his child. I don't know if you guys have seen The Box, which is a pretty disturbing movie, but it's really literally choosing between the wife and the son, and it's a horrible movie. If you don't like bad endings, don't watch it. But you can see that happen in a lot of books that you read. The character has to choose between one or the other at the end of the scene, or the character doesn't get their goal and things get even worse. Like when Liam Neeson goes to the airport, questions the guy, he doesn't get all the information that he needs, and the guy jumps off the bridge and dies. And so that's even worse for him because now that whole source is gone and he doesn't have any way to get that information. When you get to the end of your scene and you say yes but or no and furthermore, it creates new twists on your plot. it also creates rising stakes. And rising stakes keep the reader turning the pages because things keep getting worse. Right now I'm reading Scott Carson's While They Wait. And at the end of every scene, like, he's a reporter and he's uncovering information, and everything that he uncovers begins to make him question the reality of the situation that he's in and the reality of his past. So every single thing that he uncovers in his quest to do the story makes things worse for him. So just to break down scene and sequel in a really easy way, it's action and reaction. 99% is action, that's your scene, and the sequel is the reaction, where the character's like, oh crap, that just happened, now what do I do? You want to work in, of course, showing instead of telling. You want to do all these things, right? A backstory that's triggered, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do all that in this video. Moments of despair and hope, I did a video on those, and the character's weaknesses and strengths. And again, we're going to show you all of this in the scene that I'm going to show you. Okay, so this scene is from There to Back Again, which I indie published after I got the rights back on what was called The Sweetheart Bargain, I believe, with Berkeley. That book came out a while ago with Berkeley, but I got the rights back, updated it, and re-released it. So that's what it's called now. And you will see that I highlighted the different things there. I don't know why this is all pink, but that shouldn't be. But the goal is green, the motivation is blue, the conflict is yellow. And I want you to really pay attention to how much yellow is on these pages that I use from There to Back Again. The blue text is showing and the red text is telling. So you can see how some of it's blended in together. But let's talk about Luke's scene goal. So his scene goal is to get the yard done. His goal is to finish the yard and start living his life again. He was blinded in an accident that killed his best friend. And so he has a lot of guilt, and he's been kind of living like a hermit for a long time. And his internal goal is to stop being so lonely and to kind of open up, because he had a full life before all this happened. He's in there and he's taking an action. And it's all action and showing in the very beginning. Hard, sweaty, back-breaking work. The forest that had been his backyard began to resemble something civilized and green. Trimmed, raked, bagged, weeded. These are all really visual verbs. This is him having conflict with what he just did. The shrubs were probably cockeyed, and he'd undoubtedly pulled half for perennials and half weeds. He couldn't tell them apart even when his vision was 20/20. So that is working in the conflict. Like, yes, I did the yard, but I probably did a crappy job. And it's because I can't really see, because he's got this vision problem. Now he's excited because he's creating something he can enjoy. And when he talks to the dog, there's a stray dog in this scene, he does it because the dog seems to listen and understand. And when I have that line in there, that's telling, because I'm using the verb to be. In his head, he thinks crazy thoughts, he'd been alone too long. So this is conflict for him. Like, yes, the dog is giving me some kind of help, but now this is a crazy thought because I've been alone. Oh, let me tell you how that works into the entire book length goal. So Luke's book length goal is to plug back into his life. He's been released from the Coast Guard. There was a Coast Guard accident, and he has come back home. And at first he just wants to be left alone, but eventually he realizes he needs to get back to his life in some way, shape, or form. But his conflict with that is doing so means telling people what he did, and he feels very guilty about his friend dying. So that's how that feeds into the book length goal. Okay, when you have a good scene goal, you don't want to spell it out like a book report. And if you go back to here, I have the yard look better and with a good mowing. I don't say his goal was to make the yard look better, because then it's a book report, right? Nobody wants that. You want to show it, trimmed, raked, weeded, bagged. That's showing instead of telling. And you can have a little bit of telling, and you need to make it important. For the reader, seeing Luke do this makes them really sympathetic to him, because this yard work is his first step out into the world, basically. And so the reader really cares about it. And the stakes are high, even though it doesn't really seem it, because it's just yard work. But because this is the very first time he stepped outside his comfort zone and his ogre life, the stakes are high for him. You always want things to get worse at the end, and then you create a new goal, because when things get worse, you have to create a new goal. This scene is in the very middle of the book. I think it's almost exactly the middle of the book, when he's finally having a little bit of growth. Authors have a goal for the scene themselves, and then the characters have a goal. The author's goal sometimes is to have a save the cat moment, where you're showing the character being a nice person. Or sometimes it is to, bring out some kind of an emotional thing about the character. You have something you want to get on the page that doesn't necessarily feed into the character's goal. You have a reason for writing this scene, but it has to go along with the character's goal. The character has to be doing something towards their big goal. So it's all little actions towards this. This is from With My Little Eye by Jocelyn Jackson. And her goal, she moved from LA to Atlanta because she wants to feel safe. She's been stalked. And so that's her, she wants to be able to do normal things. She wants her daughter to have a normal life. So this is another way of showing you how the goal is. And yeah, this is a little bit more spelled out. I wanted to do normal things and I wanted to feel safe. But it's right there in the very beginning of this scene. And here's her motivation. She wanted to calm down. She needed a friend. This is why she's come here. She needs to kind of reestablish her life. But then she feels somebody watching her. So that is conflict. So just what she thought she escaped has followed her there. So that's the goal, motivation, and conflict all in the beginning of that scene. All right, so now we're back to this one. So now I bring in the other character because this book is a romance. It's a single title romance. But there's also a bunch of other plot lines in there. So the romantic storyline is maybe half the plot. And so I have to bring, obviously, the heroine into the scene at some point. She comes back, and here's conflict for him, because this is the one person he's trying to avoid, because, again, he doesn't want to be out among people and be reminded of what he had done. And then I show the dog, and the dog is not just there to be a dog. And you'll see why in a second. The dog has, it's all showing. That's what the blue is. Tail wagging, head butting up against her palm. She indulged the dog, talking in sweet low tones about nonsense, cooing praise and affection. Chance lapped it up, pressing his long golden body against her thigh, his tail moving at hurricane speed. So that is showing that the dog is loving this, which, anybody who's had a golden retriever knows that dogs are like that. That dog is a metaphor for what Luke wants. He watches this dog do everything that he can't do. And the dog is a stray who is damaged, who has been wounded. The dog is basically Luke in an animal form. And he watches the dog do this, and envy curdles in his gut. When you talk about emotion, they have to have a reaction to a trigger. People don't just randomly have emotions. We don't just randomly say, okay, I'm going to cry, without any kind of a trigger there. There has to be something that triggers the emotional reaction in the character, because they need to a reason to have it, essentially. So he sees the dog, and that makes him feel envious. And I have a physical reaction to that, envy curdled in his gut. So that is a physical reaction with the emotional reaction. Okay, so what that moves into is backstory. So the dog goes and loves on Olivia. Luke sees it and is envious of the dog, and then that triggers a memory in him of where that comes from. Remember how we talked about deep emotional wounds with characters? This is part of his deep emotional wound, that his father was never there in his life. No matter what Luke achieved, no matter what Luke did, no matter how good of a job Luke did in the Coast Guard or how many lives he saved, his father was just like, whatever. That moment with the dog triggers the memory of him rushing to greet his father when his dad just goes, hey, get the paper for me. So you can see that pain in Luke's memory that is triggered by the same thing. If you think about how a dog is, right? Like, love me, love me, love me. That's how a 3-year-old often is with their parents. So you can see how that is triggered by that moment with the dog. And so he envies the dog, and then he has emotional conflict about that, because he's not sure that he even knows what joy is. And I think he thinks he doesn't deserve it. This is him relating back to the dog and relating it to himself and relating it to his backstory. You will also see that backstory is, 3 sentences, maybe 2 sentences. It's very, very short, because what backstory does with your scene is halts everything. It's like, oh, wait, we're going to have a memory here. And the longer you have it, the longer the reader is just watching the character have a memory. I'm not saying you can't have long memories in there, but they should be what is called active backstory, but we'll get to that in a minute. This is just a short little backstory moment because I don't want it to drag on. Okay, and now he takes an action showing that this is what he's going to do. He envies the dog. He sees her. He's attracted to her. He clears his throat and closes the distance between them. So he takes an action to get closer to her. And then he tells her why he's doing the yard, and she looks around. He admits that this kept his mind occupied, but he doesn't admit his emotional thing because A, he's a guy. Guys don't tend to talk about their emotions a whole lot. And B, he's trying to just sort of focus on the yard work, which was his goal. And he doesn't want to think about her in another way because he's really attracted to her, and he definitely doesn't want to do that. And so focusing on the yard work instead of focusing on her allows him to put a little distance in there. And he notices the dress. That's a showed detail, and that shows exactly how he's attracted to her and what he's attracted to. But he notices the sundress. He notices that she's a little bit taller, and he puts that with the one word, tempting. That's enough. You don't have to go on and on and on sometimes, particularly in a male point of view, because men don't tend to ramble on and on and on. But this attraction to her raises the stakes, because now he's probably going to have to do something about that. And if he wants her, he's going to have to open up and also get back out into the world, which he doesn't want to do. Olivia's goal just pops in there just a little bit because I'm setting up for the next scene with her. She had somebody breaking into her house. So that's, you didn't happen to see anyone over at my place. And that's her goal. It remembers that he can't see hardly anything. And again, that's a conflict for him. So he can't help her. He can't save the cat with this moment. He is no good to her for that. They have a very short conversation about why. And then he thinks about how the open door bothers him. That raises the stakes because, again, what's Luke doing here? Luke is getting involved, and Luke does not want to get involved because that means he cares. That means he has to open up. So the open door bothering him is him getting involved, and he does not want to do that. Olivia was right. The place was in disrepair, and undoubtedly the doors were loose is all telling because I'm using adverbs and the to be verb. But it's fine because you're mixing it in. See the blue with the showing and then the red with the telling. It's all working in together. So you're not just dragging on with telling for the reader. And then her mood seems off, somehow troubled. So if he asks her about that, again, that's conflict. That raises the stakes. That forces him to get involved. And what does Luke absolutely not want to do? It's get involved. And if you look back at these, and I just want you to look at the colors, you see how much yellow is on every single page. Oops, wrong page. There's yellow on every single page. There's yellow in almost every paragraph. The reason why is you want conflict throughout the book. And you guys have watched my videos on conflict. This is what I mean. You want it constantly there. And in a romance novel, if you're writing one of those, or if you have a romantic storyline, then you're going to have external conflict, internal conflict, and romantic conflict. And all of those things are working here all together in this scene. Then he just says to her, anytime. And this shows a little bit of growth for him because he actually sort of kind of offers to help. Because before this, he was just kind of like barking at her like Shrek, but he means it. He'd enjoyed the dog and he'd enjoyed seeing her twice in one day. So him taking a baby step towards getting closer to her. She says, I'm going to leave. And he's conflicted about that. This is him responding in his head to what she said. Like she said, you're not a horticultural plan kind of guy. And he wants to know, well, what kind of guy do you think I am? But he doesn't ask her because she leaves. She turned to go. That should be yellow too, because that's conflict. Chance goes along with her. And again, this is all showing. Clutches the rake, the wooden handle pressed against his aching hand, the new calluses building on his palm. This rake is a metaphor for everything going on with him, because the rake, he's using it. You will see him use it a couple more times in this scene. He's using it as kind of a crutch, but it is also him. He's aching because he's kind of working hard and he hasn't done that kind of hard work in a while. And he's building up calluses, which is what you do when you grow stronger. Mentally and emotionally, he's halfway through the book, so he needs to grow a little. He's growing stronger. And then he does an action. Instead of turning back and giving into the need for retreat, that is growth. Huge growth right here. He decides to say, wait. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny thing because characters don't have like immediate overnight growth. He just steps outside of his comfort zone and says, wait. She turns back and asks him what he wants. And now he's using this as an excuse. Again, he's using the dog because the dog is really close to her. Maybe we should take the dog to the beach. There's the old lighthouse. I can tell you about the pirate lore of Rescue Bay. And we're using the rake. His grip on the rake tightened because now he's a little nervous because he's asking her on a date and he's been kind of cranky up until now. And he's not sure if she's going to want him. And again, his conflict is, I don't want to open up about the reason why I'm kind of living in this solitude. Raising the stakes for him is asking her on a date. And now he's using the legends of pirates and buried treasure, and he's beating himself up because he's like being like a 15-year-old. And when I write things like this that are the male character thinking, I usually say them out loud to myself so I can see, does this sound like a girl or does this sound like a guy? And I'm not trying to be stereotypical here, but I'm looking at my character and saying, is this the way that he would sound? Or would he be a little more gruff or a little bit more explanation? And Luke is, military Coast Guard guy, so he's not going to be all fluff and romance there. She gets invested in the pirates, and I work in teeny tiny bit of the setting so that the reader can kind of figure out what Rescue Bay is about, because Rescue Bay is a town that is in 3 books that are linked. So I want the reader to be invested in Rescue Bay too. Using this also is another metaphor for what's going on with him. And I'm not trying to hit the reader over the head. He sees her kind of as his lighthouse, and he's got all these rocks he has to get by, all of these issues that he has in order to get close to her. And she's been through a lot, so she's like, good luck, I could use some of that. He thinks they all could. The dog, because the dog's a rescue, they could all use a little turn of fortune. So she says something, he reacts, but it's a short, quick reaction, because again, he's a male. But at each thing that he's taking a step towards in this scene is him getting a little bit closer to her and then pulling back, a little closer, pulling back. That is basically how characters work, a little closer and back, a little closer and back. She looks for where the lighthouse is and she can't see it. Takes that rake and he puts it to the side. When I look at these things, am I thinking, oh, I'm going to use this rake and it's going to be a crutch for him and it's going to be a metaphor and I'm going to have him put it against the wheelbarrow? I do not think of any of that when I write the book. It happens instinctually. And then when I go back and analyze it, I'm like, oh, look at how brilliant that was.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
I use that rake and then he puts it against the wheelbarrow and hey, he's moving on, he's growing. So if you study a lot of fiction and you write a lot of fiction, these things will happen too for you instinctually. None of this analysis is happening as I write. I write from my gut. So he leans the rake against the wheelbarrow. He walks over to her, and then I have a little sexual tension because it is a romance. Then he clears his throat because, again, he's putting a little distance there. He's like, oh, you can only see the top of it. Look past the trees. Do you see it? And of course, she doesn't, because she's not as tall as he is. Because now we're creating a moment for the two of them to get closer. So he bends down and he picks her up because that's what he would do. And this is his little teeny tiny kind of save the cat moment, right? He's being a nice guy. And I have all this showing that she laughed. She wrapped her arms tight around his shoulders, leaned into his chest, a perfect warm fit. He inhaled the floral scent of her perfume. So now what is he doing? He's starting to fall for her even more. And she says, what are you doing? And he goes, I don't know, in his head. And he says, ironically, helping you see, because he's partially blind. And this whole scene is about him starting to see himself, starting to see a future, starting to see another kind of life. And again, I'm not thinking this when I'm writing it, but this is the glimmer moment that I talk about when I talk about writing those in your book, because the reader looks at that and says, oh, look, he's growing a little. He could possibly fall in love with her. We don't want the reader to immediately think, oh, he's going to fall in love by page 72. I don't want that to happen. I want the reader to kind of be guessing. And that's why we've got the push-pull, push-pull. Now I have a little bit of sexual tension in there because, again, it is a romance. And he says, it's beautiful, isn't it? And he's not at all talking about the lighthouse, of course. He's looking at her. He doesn't want to talk about lighthouses or beaches or raking. He just wants to talk about her. There's the development of the romantic storyline. All of this is conflict. Why am I getting close to her? And I really, really want her. And now I shouldn't want her because he knows what's going on. So this is all conflict in the yellow. She just goes, oh. And she's like, I should get down before I hurt you. And he says, you couldn't hurt me. And she says, oh, I can. You underestimate me. And that is subtext. That is a conversation running under the conversation. So it's repartee, obviously, between the male and the female characters, but it's also what she's thinking and he's thinking, that she can absolutely hurt him because she's got her own demons to deal with. And I'm not talking about her in this particular scene, but that subtext makes the reader think, oh, they're going to drift apart because she is out of his arms. She's back on the ground. She's brushing at her dress, even though there was nothing to whisk away. So she is using all these actions of brushing at her dress and all of that to put physical distance between them. This is her showing, I'm trying to get distance between us without us telling the reader. The reader can figure it out. We have all seen people go, brushing at their clothes, and we know that they're trying to avoid something. He turns away and he gets busy Because what does a man do when things are going wrong or things get emotional? They act. So he starts to going back to work. Because again, his goal for the scene was to get the yard work done. And he's still got a little bit left to do. And he's using the work to kind of escape what's going on. She says, maybe someday I'll go over to see the lighthouse. And he realizes that she said, I, not we. So that, again, that push-pull, they get close. He realizes she doesn't say we, and he thinks maybe she doesn't want me. So you're constantly creating that conflict. Again, conflict is 4 times on this teeny tiny section of the page. He's reading that through the lens of his own issues. And it isn't necessarily what's going on, because sometimes we'll say, maybe I'll get over there someday to see the lighthouse. And sometimes a woman will say that, hoping the guy will say, hey, I'll take you. And so it doesn't necessarily mean she doesn't want him. It is him misreading what she is saying through the lens of his deep emotional wounds. Then her conflict is that she's got so much work to do on the house, and she's like, oh, I don't know if I can ever do it. And so that kind of gives her a reason to not get close to him, because again, she has her own issues. And then he asks her kind of again to go out. If you want to bring the dog back, right, maybe around dinner time, and she says no. So he has tried and failed, tried and failed, tried and failed. That's what I talk about in your scenes. Your character needs to fail. And this is what happened. He asked her out. She said, I'll go. He asked her out again. She says, I have plans. So he has tried and failed. And when you try and fail and try and fail and then try again, you grow and change. First chapter, Luke would have just said, okay, fine, and gone back to his house. He wouldn't have tried again. Middle of the book, Luke does 2 stabs at it and then decides, okay, she doesn't want me, because he's not completely grown and changed. So he thinks that she's giving him a hint that she doesn't want him. So what does he do? He is a man. He goes back to work on his goal. So the character is doing stuff while this dialogue is happening. You're putting in these little lines that remind the reader that the character has these conflicts. Her leaving is a conflict. Her rejecting him twice is a conflict. All of those are showing there. Her leaving and her turning him down also raises the stakes, because now his attempts to get out of his self-imposed cage are not working. He's either going to have to try harder or he's going to have to do something else. Right here, the reader's just like, aw, man, because you can see that they're both attracted to each other. We know that they're both attracted to each other. We know that they both like each other. And it's sad for the reader, because the reader is also having this push-pull roller coaster, right, throughout the scene, because they get close, they drift away. And the reader's like, oh, just go out with him, go out with him. And when she turns him down a second time, the reader hopefully feels really bad for him and can sympathize with him withdrawing. So the reader is going to be invested at this point too. Now comes the sequel, which I will show you. Okay, so that was the scene. This is him doing work, then her coming over, them having this conversation, him stepping out of his comfort zone a little bit, him deciding to try to become a bigger person. That's the scene. That's everything that happened in there. And it's not a scene with a ton of action. I didn't pick one where there's like a gunfight, because I wanted to show you guys how you can do it on a micro level, how you can do it with just any ordinary, well, of course, all of your books are going to be extraordinary, but any kind of plot. It does not have to be gunfights and shootouts with the bad guys. It can be something simple that has high stakes for that particular character. When you get to the end of the scene, so Luke gets to the end of the scene, he's stepped out of his comfort zone, he asked her out, she says no twice. So he has the emotional reaction. I'll go back and show that to you, that he's like, he didn't need a sledgehammer to the side of the head to get the hint she'd been giving him today. So he's feeling rejected. And now the character has a quandary. This is how you want to end your scene. What the heck am I going to do now? They have to make a decision and then take an action. And the sequel should be very, very short. So I've got a picture here of a plane going down, because one of the examples that I read before about sequels was about a stewardess that kind of has to take over in the cockpit when the pilot passes out or dies or whatever. And so she has to take over, and the plane's going down. So she doesn't have a whole lot of time to think about it. She has seconds to make a decision, or they're all going to crash and die. So she's like, oh crap, what do? I don't know how to drive a plane. Well, I'm going to try. So her emotional reaction, oh crap, what am I going to do, is her quandary. I don't know how to drive a plane, the conflict in there. I'm going to try it anyways, is her decision and her new action. So she gets behind the throttle and starts driving the plane. So that is how your sequel happens. You want it to be short because remember what I said in the beginning, the scene is action and the sequel is reaction. And nobody likes to sit and watch people reacting for pages and pages and pages. We want them to kind of get on to the next thing. When I first wrote my first books, and you guys can see that video on my crappy first book, it was very telling. It was very literal. It was terrible. When I look back at the snippets of the first books that I wrote, I can see that all I'm doing is telling. I'm not using anything in the scene. I'm not using the setting. I'm not using the character. I'm not using the emotions. I'm not taking the items in the setting and using them to really up the emotion. Because that rake for Luke is not just a rake. It's an excuse. It's an avoidance technique. It is a symbol of what he's going through. It's a lot of different things. So it's not just a rake. I totally like the push-pull conflict because that's what really keeps people just continuing to turn the pages. It's kind of like the tension as the roller coaster is rising up the hill. And I have to tell you guys, I despise roller coasters. I hate them with every fiber of my being, and I will not go on them because I am terrified by them. And my father scarred me as a child by taking me to the fair and saying, look at how those bolts are coming loose. And so I am completely terrified of roller coasters, but I like them in my book. Let's talk about the sequel. So she's rejected him twice, and then a touch on his shoulder, and he catches a scent of her perfume. So I'm echoing the perfume again. And she says, can I take a rain check? So he didn't completely fail. She says to him, I'd love to do that. And now the joy that he said he wasn't even sure he could recognize blooms into a smile on his face that is showing, and he knows it's a damp smile as if he were 17 again, which is what he had been thinking about before, right? Asking her like a dorky teenager. All of this is echoing what has already happened in the scene. Then we have a little bit of showing because this is his reaction to her saying yes. Yay, he got the date with Olivia. Awesome. Yes, but now he remembers that dating her means opening up to her and telling her what he had done because he's got this big scar on his eye and he's blind, and she's going to say, well, what happened? So he's going to have to tell her. He does not want to do that. That raises the stakes. So if he wants to be with her, if he wants to go further down this road, he has to let her get close. He has to tell her what happened to him. So now he has a physical action that reminds him. He goes to the scar on his face, and that smile disappears because now he's remembering everything that has happened to him and what it will cost to him if he gets close to her. He tossed that rake into the wheelbarrow. So now he's not holding the rake. He's not putting the rake up. He's giving up on the yard work, and he went inside. So his action is, I'm not getting any closer to her. I'm going back to the dark. The dark welcomed him with open arms. He is going right back to where he wants to be because that is the place where he does not get hurt, and he does not have to tell people about what he thinks is wrong with what happened with his friend. This is all the sequel. This is it. This is 3.5 paragraphs. That is the sequel to the scene. It's very, very fast. Definitely try to involve a lot of the senses, not all of them. I don't literally think about how many senses I'm going to use, but I usually use 2 or 3, like scent and sight, except for Luke, it's more scent because he can't really see, and then touch and things like that, so that the reader can be really grounded in the scene. That's not it though, guys. I'm not done. So the construction of this sequel, and I want to show you how that works right there. Did Luke get his external scene goal of finishing the yard work? No. So he didn't really fully get his goal. And furthermore, he ended up asking Olivia on a date, and so now he's kind of got to get close. He has joy, then he feels fear and anxiety, and his reaction is to leave the scene and go lock himself in his house, which is what he usually does, is to just avoid. And the quandary that is left at the end of this scene and really isn't answered is he going to take that rain check, or is he going to go back to his safety zone forever? It kind of leaves it for the reader to wonder about, which hopefully will keep the reader turning the page to see if he asks her to go to Lighthouse. And his decision is, at first he decides yes, and then he decides no. Like at first he's like, yeah, I'm going to take her to Lighthouse. It's going to be great. And then, oh no, if I do that, I have got to open up to her. He goes back to his own decision and changes his mind and goes back into the house, which is where he feels safe. So conflict, Kirsten, can be at a lot of different levels. It can be subtle or it can be dramatic. It really depends on what's going on in the scene. In this particular scene, the conflict is kind of subtle because there's not a ton of like bad guys and dead bodies and any of that really going on. It's very subtle, but it is on every single page, multiple times on every page. Let's talk about the elements of a compelling scene. What you really need is tension. This is slightly different from conflict. Tension is that, oh my God, will it work out? Will it work out? Will it work out? That's what keeps a reader turning the pages. It makes them really worry about the characters. And a compelling scene ends with things going wrong in some way, shape, or form. Or they even get success and it comes at a price. For Luke, he gets success. She says yes, but that's a price that he'd have to pay. And for him, he doesn't want to pay that price. You need to have a well-done sequel. You want it to be short and move straight into the next action right away. Sequels do not have to come at the end of your scene. They can come at the beginning of the next one, but you need to have one somewhere because the character has to have some kind of reaction to the, oh crap, this just happened. Now what am I going to do? Show not tell, again, is something that's really hard to get in the beginning. It was probably one of the last things that I learned. It really makes a difference to the scene. And if you go back and you look at this scene, you can see right there, it's blue and red, blue and red, blue and red. It's showing and telling kind of all merged in together. And then the reader needs a hook at the end to keep them turning the pages. We don't know what's going to happen with Luke and Olivia. We don't know if he's going to go take her up on the rain check. And so the reader's going to turn the pages and see if they worked it out. So now here's a totally different book, and it's a scene and sequel here. This is from The Blade Itself by Marcus Saki, which is an action thriller type book. It's really, really good. I love Marcus Saki. I know him and he's a great guy. In the beginning of this scene, Danny is in an alley. They're spinning the gun and we don't really know what's going on. He looks at his partner and there's a little bit of telling. There's a gun there, and we just know that things are making him uneasy. And he makes him wonder if Karen was right to suggest he start thinking long-term, reconsider his options. So we don't really know what he's doing or why he's here. Author goes into a little bit of backstory there. In the scene, there's a big shootout. They're trying to rob this place, and it goes really badly. When that happens, he pulls out the trigger, he hits people, and then the guy is dying at Danny's feet, and he's like, oh my God, the lights are on, and everybody's gonna see us. And right here, Danny has his reaction to what has just happened in the scene where the whole thing has gone sideways and this simple robbery has become something that's a murder rap. His reaction is, I've gone to prison twice, but this would be years in prison. And he decides, his decision is, no more. I am done with Evan. I am done with this life. I'm not going there. And he walks out of the building. His emotions are all hyped up. His body's screaming at him to just go, but he just kind of goes slowly. And then here's the hook. When he was 2 blocks away, he heard the sirens, which means he's not super far away and the cops could still get him. But he has a very quick reaction and a decision to do his next action. That's it. That's the sequel. And this is a very compelling book. I got to say, it's a really good one. So this is from Dean Koontz's The Husband, which was a really, really good book. Although I didn't really like the beginning at all. I didn't find that this kind of telling here at the beginning was super compelling. I like this hook here. When the call came, he was on his knees and he's planting. This is a landscaper. He's just planting a bunch of impatiens. This guy calls him and says, give me $1 million or I'm going to kill your wife. Mitchell thinks he's just kidding. And then the guy says, I'm going to show you that I'm watching you and that I know where you are. Now the stakes have really risen for Mitchell because he's got to come up with $1 million. He's just a landscaper, right? Like a landscaper doesn't have $1 million just laying around. He's in trouble right away. Let's see how the sequel works out. They up the stakes by telling him in graphic detail what they are going to do to his wife. Just as he thinks, well, maybe I can bargain with them. Maybe I can kind of make this work out. Maybe I can somehow find a way to make this happen. They start upping the stakes. It's a lot like that scene in Ozark with Marty in the warehouse. The guy says, just so you know, we're serious. And he says, see the guy across the street, and they kill him. They kill the guy. And there's no super duper sequel here because Dean Koontz ended on a big hook. The guy's dead and the guy on the phone says, midnight on Wednesday, we're serious. So you don't have the time for the, oh crap, what am I going to do moment. This sequel is not really long at all. It's him seeing this guy killed, and then he's got to make a decision on what he's going to do in the next scene. So see how they split up the sequel in this one? It's not all entirely right there on the page. One of the things that can ruin your scenes is not having cause and effect. Remember, I've said a bunch that their character causes a lot of their own problems, and they have to because that's how they learn and grow. A lot of times people make bad decisions that they know are bad decisions, and if they don't face consequences, they don't grow and change. That's why you want your character to try and fail. There was cause and effect for Luke in that scene. Every time he tried, he failed. He tried, he failed. And that makes the stakes higher. It gets the reader more invested. You also want to have that hook that keeps the reader moving to the next page, the next chapter, the next scene. There's no rule book that says that every hook needs to have somebody dangling off the edge of a mountain or having a dead body there. That's not necessarily what you need to have. But you need to have the reader wondering, what are they going to do next? How is this going to work out? How are they going to get out of this dilemma? You write the way that you write. And I say this in a lot of my videos. I am not the be all end all only answer to how to write a book. This is how I do it. It doesn't mean it's the way that you have to do it. The characters have to fail over and over and over again because people are slow learners. It takes a while for them to get it because people don't like to change. People don't like to have to confront their issues. And so they're slow learners. And your characters are going to be the same way, except they're probably not going to take their whole lives to do it. They're going to take a book to change and do that. Okay, so I recommend these 4 books. Obviously, the writing compelling fiction books because they're amazing. I'm just saying. The Writer's Journey, I love that, especially if you want to create a book based on mythical structure. But the great thing about Vogler is that he takes movies and tears them apart and talks about how they use mythic structure. You don't have to use mythic structure, but if you're really into structuring your book and knowing a lot of these things in there, then that really helps you do that. And Writing the Breakout Novel by Donald Moss is one of my favorites. I also really love Becca Simey's book, Dear Writer, You Need to Stop, but it's a really great psychological, mental sort of book about writers. The Writing Compelling Fiction workbook is out and it's new, and then there's obviously the original Writing Compelling Fiction. If you want to see the highlighter method version of this scene, then sign up at the community. The Writing Compelling Fiction community is free and all my handouts are there, so if you're not already a member, I highly encourage joining. Blogger asks what percentage of backstory should be used in the prologue if you write in dual and deep point of view. Backstory slows your book down. Backstory is like turning the car around a road trip and going back home. So you don't want to have a ton. Prologues, I have got a couple videos out about prologues. Prologues should be short, they should be relevant, and they should be active. So when you have backstory, you have a choice to write it as a memory or as it actually happened. And when you can write it actively, it really makes a big difference in terms of how the reader feels, whether the reader feels like it's just dragging them back or what. And so overall, yes, it is hard to know how much to put into a scene with emotion. For one of my tips for that would be look at whether it's a male or a female character, because male characters typically do not have a whole lot of emotional thinking. This is not a diss against guys. This is just how men typically work. They're problem solvers. And if you tell them what's going on, they listen and they try to give you a solution. They're not typically dwelling on a lot of their emotions. So if your character is male, then you kind of want to get through the emotion a little bit faster. And you also want to look at what's going on in terms of the action in the scene. Characters don't have a ton of time to think and feel emotion if other things are happening. That is not the time to sit there and think, oh, really, I wish I could have done this and I wish I could have done that. But you need to act it out, because then you can see if it's natural for somebody to speak that long or to move and do this while they're speaking. So acting out your scenes makes a lot of sense. It really helps you see, is this a stupid time for my character to sit here and feel all these things? Because sometimes it is. The conflict doesn't have to be some terrible, awful thing. It's not always some terrible, awful thing. It stems from a deep emotional wound. It stems from something that happened to them. It doesn't have to be a horrible traumatic thing, as I've said before. The emotional reaction that they have comes from that. So Luke feels like he killed his friend. He didn't. It was an accident. He feels like then everybody's going to judge him for this terrible thing that he did. And he doesn't want to have to open up about that. So that whole wound that happened before the book even opened is what's happening in his conflict. And it's what colors how he reacts to things and how he interprets things. You don't want to have a ton of backstory because the reader doesn't care. The reader is not invested in the character yet. Let me explain it this way. You have a neighbor move in next door that you've never met before, and they open up their door and they start talking to you. Be way more intrigued and want to go back there if the neighbor's like, yes, I came here from Wisconsin. I don't want to talk about it. If you don't know why they came here from Wisconsin, then you're really going to want to figure out what happened there. You really want to have the reader in for the ride as soon as possible. When you don't know everything about why the character acts that way, you bring it out a little bit at a time. Remember Lost and how insanely popular that was? That was because none of us had any backstory. We literally opened up with the character's eye. We knew nothing about where they came from or who they were or what they wanted. You really want to intrigue the reader, and you don't want to just spit all that backstory on the page. The reader does not know what Luke did. The reader does not know the truth about what happened up in that helicopter yet, because I don't want the reader to know that. So the reader does not know what happened. And that is all backstory that I leave until he actually opens up about it. The character doesn't go on and on in their heads about their backstory. And especially if it's something that they don't want to address, you've got to also think about whether the character, this particular character at this particular moment in time, would be thinking about those memories. Lots of these really compelling shows do that in a great way of just slowly trickling in the backstory so that you are hooked and you want to know why the character acts the way they do. And that mystery of the character, no matter what level it's on in your book, whether you're writing a mystery or you're writing a romance or you're writing women's fiction, that mystery is really what keeps the readers coming back for more and more and more. For me, with revision, I start looking at, do they have a goal for this scene and how do things get worse? And how can I add more conflict between them? So I'm usually looking at those particular things, because if they don't have a strong goal for the scene, then the scene doesn't need to exist. And I'm also looking at, how is the character causing their own problems? What are they doing that's creating more of their own problems? So you're going to want to look for those things because they will raise the stakes. I'm always asking, how can I make this worse? How can I make it harder on the characters? How can I put this further out of their reach? And what can go wrong here? Because that's what makes it really interesting, especially the question why. I love to know, why did this happen? Why did the character do this? Why are they acting this way? Why are they saying this? And what is the impact on them and on the other characters? Because why and what was the impact are probably the best questions you can ever ask yourself when you're writing. Because the more you can figure out why, the more you can see the impact and the more emotionally you can connect with the reader. In a romance, the love story is 100% not the goal. Their meet cute needs to somehow conflict with their external goal, because the romance complicates everything. How do you decide who needs to be in the scene? But if you're asking whose point of view the scene takes place in, I usually look at which is the character that has the most to lose or the most to grow. I really want to make that the more impacted character. All about what are they going to lose and what is this going to cost them, because that price, remember I said that early in the beginning of this, the price creates their growth. The price creates the sequel. The price they pay for whatever happens in that scene forces them to grow, change, and take a new action, which they may or may not want to take. Ozark is a perfect example of that, of things seeming to get better and then they get worse and then they have to take a new action and it gets worse and it gets worse and until everybody dies. That's exactly how a really great plot arc works. You definitely want to have a character that has a lot to lose or a lot to learn in a scene, because that gives you a bigger emotional bang for your buck.